Alright, we are back with the double swing. There's another big event on the way, and we are conveniently smashing this video out as the play-ins are being played before the actual group stage starts, because everything has just been smushed into one big amalgam, and it's very awkward to get anything really recorded. So in the background, we still have the decider games happening, so it's kind of messed with some of the underdog picks, but we'll get to that when we get to it. We'll start with the favourites, just to give ourselves a little bit of leeway. Before diving into all that, let's quickly recap last event, which was the Blast Spring groups. I ended up with 2 points. My favourites did their job. Underdog picks, let's not talk too much about those, especially the NIP one. Yumi performed a little bit better. Vitality VP both made it through for him, and so did his underdog pick of Astralis. So he currently is ahead of me with 3 points. Viewers got a maximum 4 out of 4. To be fair, I think I'm the only person who didn't see Astralis making it out of that group. Fair enough. So that's a bit of a rough start for me, but I think I've got a good chance to bring it back straight away. Don't you think, Yumi? Do you like your picks this time?
We'll get there when we get there. Listen, all I'm saying is it's your fault that you fell behind. You pick NIP, and why? You just keep on digging.
I'm a Counter-Strike romantic, okay? I can't help it. I've fallen for this team, all their flaws. You know, it's like they're the ugly Betty of Counter-Strike. I can't wait for that makeover. At some point, the braces come off, the hair will get did, and they'll look amazing.
But you don't have influence over whether or not they do their hair up. You can't.
I keep believing.
You can't fix them. They have to fix themselves.
I believe, okay? I believe. I see so much potential in them. But I'm going to make up for it. This event, I'm going to smash it. And I'm going to start with my own favourite pick first. And it's the biggest favourite of this event. Obviously, it's Vitality. I think it goes without saying that they're going to be favourites for most events until they start showing us something different. They looked amazing at the last event. Made it out of groups very solidly. And there's not much else to add, so Vitality still got currently the best player in the world. Donk's coming, but for now, it's still ZywOo. They've got a great supporting cast. Everything makes sense on this team. I've still got them as favourites to win most events until proven wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to beat. I mean, ZywOo is playing great. Like you said, I mean, Spinks is looking stellar. And, you know, the early days for this Vitality team, especially when they just started with Mezzi, I mean, they're just met with trophies immediately. So it was kind of hard to fault picking Vitality. You know, I picked them for Blast Spring groups, and I was more than content with it. But I think there's also, you know, maybe a conversation to be had about what happens when that doesn't work. And also, you know, this Astralis team that, you know, I also had them as underdogs, and I'll be honest, I don't expect them to beat Vitality typically, but Vitality honestly kind of destroyed Astralis kind of destroyed Vitality when it came to that best of 3 they played in the spring group. So I think there's a little bit of I was a bit hesitant to pick Vitality just because I don't think Astralis is still all the way there yet. I think they've got more than enough firepower to make it work, but I don't know that there's a like unique identity or like a proper structure in place just yet. And so I'm a little fearful that Vitality might need the sort of added prep work, or might need, I don't know, still a little bit of time still ahead of the major. You know, I'd still paint them as one of the favorites for the major, but I think this ramp up period for that big event may be a little slower for them.
I see it as a bit of the G2-esque initial event slump. We've seen G2 at a number of Blast events look terrible coming into the new year. I think for them it was the same thing. They took a bit of a jolt to wake them up, and then with Katowice, they're going to bounce right back and win it. That's kind of been the formula. And when I talk about G2, that is. And yeah, I saw a bit of that in that opening best of 3. It wasn't an opening best of 3. They lost that after beating OG, if I'm not going crazy. But then they did come back.
OG's not really a game, so
yeah, OG is just a warm up. It's an amuse-bouche before a real meal.
They 13-0'd them in the first map.
Yeah, it was pretty cringe. I was watching that. I was like, oh god. After all that time, people following like OG and Bleed as well, but OG and like the open qualifiers for the major, everyone really wanted to see them go through. Everyone hyping up Heavy God just to get pounded into the earth like that was horrifying for them. I don't doubt it. So yeah, I wasn't really too bothered about it. I still think they're the best team in the world. It's going to come back to them. And Katowice, yeah, I've got them solidly as my pick to win the event. No.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any real arguments to be made, but I feel like there's quite a few favorites or like contender teams coming around to the major, and Katowice is kind of no different.
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from. I think we're getting very dense now. The field that are chasing Vitality and to a lesser extent FaZe is getting really thick with teams. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting discussions to be had in the coming events. So, but before we get to that, Yumi, your first favorite, who have you gone with?
So I've gone with FaZe instead. This to me, the FaZe team I still think has some work to do. They lose to Gamer Legion at the start of Blast Spring groups, where there's a lot of talk about the implementation of Frozen and how much work they've put in. But I've saw good stuff from Frozen and the squad that after they you're kind of talking about the jolt that they needed to get into the swing of things for Vitality. For FaZe, it actually was in their opening game that happened. And I've got a lot of respect for Ash and I guess the Gamer Legion backend staff to have sort of done a lot of homework ahead of that game in preparation. I think Gamer Legion as well at the play-ins were able to beat VP pretty handily and make them look very uncomfortable, which VP is another team I hold in very high regard. So for me, I feel like that's more a credit to Gamer Legion sort of outdoing the FaZe guys than anything else. And I just simply think that there's very few teams that are going to challenge within their group for a top slot in the playoffs, let alone, when they get there, this team is just made of players that will perform on big stages.
100%. And the jolt effect is right, because the second time they play Game Legion, sure, they lost one map in OT. It was Game Legion's pick, again, a map they are going to have very well prepped. The other two maps weren't even close. They were just slaughters. So I think FaZe, yes, is still a solid pick. I don't think there's too much to be worried about from that perspective. I do think they look a little bit less championship ready than Vitality, just in that direct head-to-head comparison with this Frozen edition. But I think, yeah, if they get it right and they get rolling as we think they can, as we've seen Frozen look amazing in a couple maps where he's dominated, then yeah, they'll be right on track as well, and it'll be hopefully a rivalry that we get to witness over and over again in big grand finals. So really excited for FaZe. Not really that bothered about the losing the Gamer Legion game. It was a bit, whatever to me.
Yeah, but I mean, then they destroyed Spirit without Donk, so
without Donk. Without two players. It wasn't even just Donk missing. It was
I know. Magix as well.
Yeah. So we had Hallie and Baz. I mean, Baz is all right, but he's still a kid, and Hallie's he's a coach.
Hallie, honestly, I don't know. Compared to expectations for me, Hallie actually did about what you would expect, and maybe even to a certain extent overperformed. So, Perhaps, when your coach is slotting in, though, the expectation is like all the way down here. So
it's so bad. It's so awful. So the fact that he can click and move around is a massive bonus. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It wasn't too much of a stretch to pick either of these teams. To give ourselves the time to see the underdogs develop, because they could change certain picks certain people have made. We're going to do the favourites just all in a big block at the start. So our second team we have to talk about from my end is from Group A. It's the team that's going to be facing FaZe in that decider game on Tuesday. That is Na'Vi. Now, I had the opportunity to pick Na'Vi at Blast and didn't. And I've picked them here simply because what I saw at Blast, was the best Counter-Strike we've seen Na'Vi play as an international lineup. It was phenomenal. Now, not only is it a question of Bit stepping up and looking like truly a superstar, it was also Immer having impact, having rounds where he looked like he had his good read of the game, like he had the feel for the game back, like when he was making Gamer Legion look good. It was that coming back to play. So I really liked what I saw at that event. Sure, I would have liked maybe a little less CIS-ness about the Wonderful, because he was very much death rate farming and not really doing a whole lot. But all in all, the team played good Counter-Strike, the Alexi B system seemed to be clicking with everyone a little better, and the individuals popped off. So that's what I want to see, and hopefully they can keep that going here. I mean, I know Alexi B, we heard that interview where he didn't seem to be too confident in the way they were playing. He gave a bit of a vibe of like, oh yeah, hopefully we can keep this up. What the hell is this? That's kind of the gist of the way it came across. So hopefully that was more of just a communication issue rather than a real doubt in his own team's abilities. And they keep playing here at a high level.
Yeah, Navi for me is always an interesting project because I think on paper it looks fine. The roster looks fine. I think for me, I've got a lot of questions about production of players, production of the in-game leader in Alexi, because this is an Alexi that went from being very rigid, very micro of his players, and I think that's a narrative that's sort of carried forward with him. But in the past few rosters we've seen of him, he's loosened up, and you can tell they're playing a very different style of Alexi brand CS. There's still a couple of rounds where it seems like there are things that he's orchestrating or creating, but it feels like he's kind of let his hair down a bit. So maybe that's part of the reason why there's a little bit of hesitance about sort of taking ownership or maybe having high expectations for the team, because so much of it feels a little bit more individual than what I think Alexi is sort of used to when it's actually his team winning. It's been so long since Alexi's been in a position where his team it can be considered a contender, and there's nothing in the cabinet to say that anything that he's done in the past can work past the major that he was able to perform at. So I think there's some value to Na'Vi currently, but I'd probably share that same hesitation as Alexi to say that they're going to perform here and now. Though I do think that there is an argument to be made that there are some certain teams that they maybe have in their locker and that they can beat on a more consistent basis. I just don't know that they're going to go all the way, so to speak.
All right, that's fair enough. I think for me, when I get to my second favourite, I really do see the scene still as being a race to catch FaZe and Vitality. So for me, Navi's a pick where get out of groups, finish top 4, I'm happy. Give me that 1 point. I'll take it every day of the week. Every little helps. And I just have a little more confidence in the roster based on what I've seen so far this year, but also the way certain other teams have made changes, that they are going to be the second best, or the best of the rest of the pack that's remaining. So who have you taken as your second favourite? I know there's going to be a bit of a discussion here.
Yeah, so the team I've actually ended up picking is G2, and it's funnily enough, I think Na'Vi are the team that will probably beat G2 when it comes down to it. They beat them twice in Blast Spring Group, so I think that is one of the teams that Na'Vi have in their locker. But I just think there's still so much that this G2 roster can give. Like I like the way that they play. I like the players on this team. I think they did well enough at Blast Spring Groups. I do think that there's still big questions about what is going on with this roster and who actually is the permanent fifth. But I've actually kind of been surprised with Nexa. I don't actually think there's too much criticism I can levy at him in terms of his play. The big shock initially was all about like why him over JKS, but I do think the team is playing with a little bit more. It's weird to say like bounce. Like they're almost swinging off each other, or the time to trade between kills feels just a little bit quicker. And I don't know if that's energy or if that's something tactically that they've discussed, but it does feel as though they're a bit more cohesive in their current form. And maybe it is still early days for Nexa to sort of make this team a champ. I wouldn't say Nexa makes the team championship caliber, but for him to be up to speed and work with this team enough that they could even threaten for a couple of trophies. Maybe it is a bit early, but I'm kind of hoping for a bit of a surprise here in Katowice, because I think G2 are actually closer to bridging that gap to FaZe and Vitality than it would maybe appear.
I would agree with you, because that was true for all of last year, that they were the closest team, that everything looked destined for them to be the third team. As we start to establish back to another top, like, good group of teams that don't just get upset and we end up with terribly cheesy, like, weak majors. I was hoping that would be one of the teams to build up to it, but since the change, I think Hunter looks a bit off, just in his roles, in his feel of the team. Like, I know it's worked with him and Nexa before, so that's not the problem. I just think it's the adjustment period back to it seems to be taking a little longer. And maybe having Nexa back in, but not having a Jax for Hunter could be the problem. It might limit Hunter in terms of how willing he is to be aggressive and how confident he feels coming into trades, and not having that guy spacing for him as effectively as Jax did historically might be a bit of a problem, because especially at Blast Spring Groups we saw terrible things from Hunter. He didn't have basically a good map, and that's a bit of an issue. So if you can avoid having 3 players sub 1.0 rating, that'll help immensely in terms of G2's chances of actually winning something. So until I see it, I'm not going to believe in it. That's the main reason I'm preferring Na'Vi over G2 right now. It's a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the argument. I think as well, from the teams that we can choose as favorites, I also had a much harder
Sure.
time trying to argue for Mao's complexity. Monty, I did consider for a moment.
You did.
Um, and the argument I would have had for Monty was that this roster just kind of has upset kind of written all over it for me, but I don't know that I can paint them as a favorite. Like I actually think they'll make playoffs, but to win the tournament, if I'm going to say a favorite is someone I think is going to win the tournament, yeah, Monty, I don't think have that in them just yet. So that's why I strayed away. Like, I feel like G2 have more of a chance than them. And then Falcons, I don't know. I can't in good confidence pick this team until they start actually doing something. And also, I have to be almost persuaded to like the Falcons because I don't know, just the whole concept of what they've got going on, I'm not a massive fan of. So
yeah, I'm gonna be honest. If this was a scenario where we're picking like 3 favorites, I guess once the play-ins will shake out, the rankings look a bit weird to you guys because Falcons will have dropped out of the favorites because one of VP or Cloud9 is coming in to fill in. But for us, the play-in team's supposed to be underdogs. Like, if you're coming from the play-in, you can't be one of the favourites. That's kind of how we've picked Katowice in the past. So I would have probably picked as my 3rd favourite, just to talk about them, would have been Falcons. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm still a die-hard Boros fanboy. I can't just shake it. It's unbelievable. He had some banger maps at Blast Spring Groups. He also had a couple pretty mid ones where, he did overpeak, he did lose some fights. But I'm still a big believer, and I think... yeah, he doesn't look lost in the Snappy system. I think the Snappy system has bent a bit to adjust for him, to allow him to slip in. They've obviously had to adjust also to having Megisk, who seems to be finding his spots fairly well. So I would have picked Falcons as a 3rd favourite, as a team to maybe go deep, be dangerous. But I get the reservations, and yeah, I know what you mean when you say you don't want to pick complexity. Who the hell would want to pick complexity right now? Mousesports, I'm surprised you skipped on, though. Is it the Brolan of it all? Is that why you're not really convinced in it?
The weird thing is I've been fine with Berlan since he's been on the roster, but just like he is 20% worse than Frozen, and that's just not enough for me that Mouse can be a team that bangs. Like, it's just not enough. So yeah.
Okay.
I have reservations about the other teams. I feel like there's not exactly a lot of proven success maybe for G2. I just think their ceiling is so much higher than some of the other teams I could have picked.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But all right, let's take some underdogs. I'm going to start with my first underdog pick. It's the pick we literally fight over every event currently.
I'm gonna throw hands.
And it's Spirit, because obviously, having my connections at the visa office, I knew that Donk would be available to play this event. I also knew he'd be unavailable for the last event. That's why I graciously conceded the first underdog pick last time. All of this is bollocks. Just luck of the draw, but hey, it's much funnier to pretend there's some sort of big conspiracy working against Yumi. And yeah, obviously I'm going to take them. How could you not? Have you seen the way they play? It's not even a question of the whole roster. It's just they have Donk, and I'm convinced he's the next coming of... well, no one, actually. He's just Donk. He's just going to change the way we think about Star Riflers. Gone is independence lurking. No, just stick him at the front of the pack and bash everything down. And he's done it so well. And even in the places where he's been an independent player, like when he plays solo mid on certain sites, like certain maps, sorry, he does look like he's getting smarter and smarter. I remember watching him play in online play. Sure, every heads-up duel he won, but he'd get caught out every now and then, and he'd make a little sloppy mistake here and there. This has so far been an even cleaner version of Donk. He's played really aggressive, really effective, and he's not even anti-stratable right now. You have to try and win fights against him, and unless you're throwing 3 people into the mix, he's probably going to win them all. So I'm really impressed with Donk. I think Spirit behind him have sneakily got a really good roster with guys like Shiro, guys like Zontix. I think they are a super dangerous roster, and until they're a favourite, we're just going to keep picking them as underdogs. And I'm pretty sure once they become favourites, we're going to keep picking them anyway, because this is one hell of a roster.
Yeah, Donk is a cheat code. This is the guy that I think right now in Counter-Strike 2 is abusing gun mechanics more than anyone else. This is a guy that was already on Go probably one of the biggest prospects that we could sort of foresee. But in the transition to CS2, it feels like he's the one that mastered the arts of the CS2 peak far better than anyone else. And on LAN, it's not the same as, an online play where wide swinging is ridiculously like shooter favored or peakers favored. On LAN, it is slightly different, but there is still, I don't know, a certain almost like moving accuracy to see Counter-Strike 2 at the moment. So even if Donk gets caught or like off guard or in a weird jiggle peak, he will still frag you because his like aiming mechanics are just so good that it's very hard to catch this guy off guard. I do think this is very rare instances, but I do think in the games where Donk does go missing, this roster does look like a bit of a shell of itself, and that was mainly with Art Frost that happened. So, you're kind of hoping Shiro kind of takes up the slack a little bit. Like you said, Zontix, I actually rate quite highly on this roster as like a very reliable closer in quite a few moments for the Spirit team. That said, it's kind of it's hard not to just be enamored with the way that Spirit play and just facilitate Donk being Donk. This guy just fighting in the middle of nowhere and killing 3 people, all headshots. Like this, he's a very hard man to contain, and the only team I've ever seen do it is Virtus Pro.
And that only lasted 2 maps.
Yeah. The only team I've seen do it on a relatively consistent basis is Virtus Pro in terms of shutting Donk out. But that's probably just because Donk is ADHD as fuck, and he's bored to high hell of what VP are doing in rounds.
Yeah.
That he like makes a mistake. But the further they get in this tournament, I think the more he straightens up. And you're right. I think this is like the cleanest I've seen Donk in terms of like not making mistakes. I think there was one moment in I want to say Spirit versus the Mongols. It was a game on Ancient, in this play-in where I did feel a little concerned. Yeah, I was a little concerned for Donk because I think it went into an overtime and Donk started to sort of slow down a little bit. He was like head in hands every time he got flashed and couldn't find a kill in a round. Like he thought the game was over almost when he was getting killed for free. There were moments where I thought, mentality could be a thing for Donk, but quite often his team actually pulled through in those rounds. So it kind of goes from a very big low for Donk to a very big high because this man is screaming after every single one round.
Yeah, I'm not even sure he's trying to scream a lot of the time because I've watched those clips 100 times. I'm still not sure what that is. It's an A sound. I'm not sure what the word is. But I must say though, the mental point, when I saw the clips of him screaming at opposition, I was like, oh god. To me, that is a bit of a weak mental thing. Like, if you're screaming after every round at your team and you overreact to everything, like maybe he's got a bit of a problem. But when you look at what's behind him, think about the team before they have Shiro. You don't have a cheat code clutch player. Now you do. That was Shiro's calling card. It was, no matter how messy and ugly Cloud9 rounds were, no matter how many kills they give away for free, every 2v5, every 1v3, still winnable just because he's alive and he's got his AWP. So I think it's a perfect combination of that sweet and salty, that entry and closer in terms of the 2 very different players they have. I think everything is working pretty nicely right now. It may, maybe the engine stops running so smoothly when we get into the bigger games, but for now, I'm very happy picking them.
Yeah. Also, Chopper as an in-game leader is like the most. I don't know. He does have his moments where he gets excited, but very often he does seem very stoic. Like maybe it's just because he's near Donk when Donk is screaming, but it always just seems like Chopper's just like, just fist bump me and move on. Like you're yelling at the other team, but let's just move on to the next round. It does seem like there's a little contrast there, and maybe that's why they're positioned so close to each other.
Probably hasn't mastered the flip up the mic trick before you scream that Apex is so good at.
It's like, oh my god.
He'll see him transition, like, bang! Like his headset's already like flicked up the mic and he's screaming. Donk, I don't think, has that, so he's screaming in his teammates' ears, and Chopper's just really annoyed. That's what it is, just like, fist bump, just shut up, please.
Yeah, I can't say anything because you're getting 37 frags this map.
Yeah. If I get too annoyed at you, go play for Cloud9. So, please. So yeah, I'm just checking the scores. We don't have either one of your underdog picks locked. Should I just do my other underdog pick?
They were like just getting into map 3 for both of them, so...
Hey, we're 10 rounds into one of them, so... I think we can let's sneak in another underdog pick just to see if we can actually get it settled ahead of time. So I've gone for my other underdog pick as a team I actually kind of liked when they assembled. I thought, wow, you guys didn't really have much to do, like much to work with, and you did a pretty decent job. That's Heroic. They've ended up with this sort of hodgepodge roster where they've nicked some international squads, like important players, like they've taken Nerts from ENCE, they've taken Kixan from Apex, and they've gone, what else can we do? We need an AWPer, and they managed to get Nikodos, who I always thought got a little bit too much ire from the community when he was playing on Copenhagen Flames and then his brief other stints. I thought, yeah, he gets called out for being a little streaky, like sometimes too aggressive, but I was like, I kind of liked that, and I thought, if you're going to be a team who's not going to have all the star power to be at big events all the time anyway, I kind of want a guy on the AWP who can carry a series against a real team. And Nikodos can, on the updates, do that. So I didn't mind that addition. So far, he's actually looked really good on this roster. His numbers have been great. And I think he's played solidly. I mean, surely, this could be a bad omen that there's a down streak coming. But for now, we're on the up, and I'm still happy with it, and we're rolling. But if we look at the rest of the roster, solid pieces that just make sense. An IGL who maybe, from what I understand, doesn't have too much of a system of his own or too much of a overall influence as a tactical leader, but who, he'll sit in the middle of the team, make it all work, and not be a bum on the fragging. So I'm not saying this team's going to go super far. I think there's an off chance they'll make it out of the groups if they can get a really good run of form from Nikodos, from Nerts, and from one of the two original Heroic core members. If those guys can get hot, there's a good chance they'll make it out the group. And we've seen them do it before, so it wouldn't be too crazy. I just think this is a team that's not championship material by any means, but definitely good enough to make it out of a group, just for now.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I think I've been a little surprised because I think when we were talking about Heroic before, the big question was always going to be about what this is like for Kixan and whether or not there's going to be any sort of overhaul in styles, because it's all just a bit of a weird blending of different play styles. Kixan, I think, like to go and get his rifling pack into position very frequently for like these bursting plays. I seem to remember on Apex, but I don't think I've seen too much of that being a necessity. I feel like there is a bit of autonomy currently with the sort of star players on this roster. I think part of the problem will be Nerts and whether or not he can actually find a good level, because I do think that there were quite a few sort of big mistakes made by Nerts when I saw Heroic play, and that's not something I would have categorized with him on ENCE. And I think that might just, kind of stem from him having to basically lock down areas or make plays with very little sort of supporting him. So, yeah, I do. Yeah, I would have hesitated. And they are an underdog, so I get it. But yeah, I hesitate to have too much faith in Heroic as of yet because, like you said, it doesn't seem like there's too much of a system in place at the moment.
No, a little too much autonomy, I think, being asked of Nerts for now, in terms of, that side of things. But it's definitely a thing. If he gets hot, he's about as good as it gets right now, because he can make the right decisions. He can have a really good instinctual feel for the game, and he is sharp. So I'm still holding out a little bit of hope. Yeah, we've not got really much closer to a resolution on any of these maps. Let's put it this way: Cloud9 look like they're set to beat Virtus Pro. Shall we discuss it as if, and then?
Listen, I've gone for VP or C9, and I've done that because, listen, when I looked at the other underdogs, what, you want me to pick Eternal Fire?
Yeah.
What? No. That is, their Eternal Fire basically have the most fraudulent run through the elimination bracket. They beat Cloud9 in a best of one, then they have to play Rebels, the local legends of Katowice, which is this
hometown buff,
yeah, I guess, but there's no crowd in the group stage, and there is simply no hope that the Rebels are going to do anything. They haven't made it through. But this Eternal Fire roster, like, it's not that I don't like them. I actually thought about picking some Eternal Fire players in my fantasy because I thought they would make it through. But I just when I look at the teams they have to face, it's like the Falcons should trounce them. They have to play FaZe versus I don't know who in the opening round. I just don't see them making it out, and I refuse to pick Gamer Legion because I do think they're a good anti-strat team, and I do think that they have some bite. You know, Acorns look okay, whatever. And then you've already taken Heroic and Spirit, so those are the only two I could have really picked. I want VP to do well, and I think Flit is a really solid rifler. I think Norbert's looks great. I think this is the best looking version of Virtus Pro we've seen, but they've had some fumbles in the play-ins. And Cloud9, this team can do so well, especially when Electronic is playing the way that he is. Hobbit honestly has had a decent play-in as well, like actually doing a great job of finding kills in really important rounds. I want an AWPer on this team.
Oh, who the fuck doesn't at this point? Like, give me
Boomich is AWPing, but I don't think I think I've seen maybe 2 kills on the AWP.
Deco, sign Dexter, sign anyone. Like, what are we doing this for?
It's just not it. So like either of these two teams, listen, I think both of them are very solid contender teams. I think when we looked at the play-ins and what it could mean, because they haven't actually concluded, you know, both of them actually end up becoming favorites categorically because of the rankings. But because they're fighting through the play-ins, yeah, I'd say they're underdogs, and they've both shown signs of weakness. You know, Boomich is a bit of a liability. I think Mir as well has not looked that great at this event. Flit has not put up the same kind of numbers that we saw out of the Blast Spring groups. So it's a little rocky for both these squads, but I am a big CIS team enjoyer, to be quite honest. Like, I loved watching Cloud9 sort of develop from Gambit into Cloud9. I'm a massive fan of Jame and the system he plays, because while it might be boring, this man gets results against top level teams.
He does, yeah. Yeah, it's a team everyone loves to hate who's doesn't really watch the game as much as maybe we do.
Even commentators and analysts
some don't watch much of the game anyway. But importantly, when you've watched a dozen teams play the same standard defaults and executes, watching VP like just do completely the opposite sometimes, of just refusing to do anything in a rush, it's refreshing and it's interesting, and it's like watching a chess match at your own speed, like a blitz game that's suddenly been played in classical time. You're like, oh well, now I get it. This all makes perfect sense. This is really beautifully orchestrated, and there's finally a team that shows it, you know, in proper time. So everyone like on this show, I know, wants VP to play well. It's just they really haven't at this event, and they were kind of Banana Cup champions, you know, coming into this. It's all been a bit of a rough one for VP, and it looks like they will fall short. So that's unfortunate. It would have been nice to see them play again, and perhaps even prove that their run was legit. But even their Blast Spring Groups run was questionable, because they did just beat Big twice to make it out. Like, sure, they beat Cloud9 in between, but again, we're talking about another team who's maybe could be better, needs an AWP. Like, there's not been a victory you can point at so far for Virtus Pro to be like, that's a number 4 team in the world. That right there makes them number 4. There's none of that. They are number 4 technically, and little else.
Yeah, there's growth to be had with this roster, and I don't know that they're gonna stay with the same roster for the entire year, because I do feel like they like change. You know, back to a mere bench, mere comeback, better roster. Who knows how this all plays out? But yeah, compared to some of the other underdogs that could be potentially making it through, you know, these are my best shots. So it's a CIS derby. It's one of those two teams for me. I would have preferred VP, I think, just because it feels like roles are more defined. But I may not get what I want. So,
you can't always.
Also, I mean, I'd be happy. Electronics playing sick. So
that's true.
I'll take whichever I can get. Just not Gamer Legion or Eternal Fire.
I mean, in your position, I would have just gone balls to the wall with Eternal Fire. tried to make some case for the firepower of the team somehow finding a way, and Wakadia is like the Turkish donk or some other nonsense. I would have come out with something.
It's not that I don't like the team, because I do think they can get an upset or whatever, and I think there is a possible way that they squeak through third, but that's just so... Actually, no, there's not even a possible way to squeak through third. I'm thinking Navi, Spirits in their face. Nah, there's not a shot. It's just the run to make it into this stage for me is just so fraudulent. It's you play a best of 3 versus the Rebels to qualify. That's not it for me. And similarly, M80 are playing the Rebels for a spot in the main stage like that. I can't pick either of those teams in good faith.
Rebels.
Def is playing, and also Rebels. Yeah, they're local, but they're just. Yeah, I've seen enough of Permita and the many iterative versions of the core that is a part of this Rebels team that I can't.
Okay. And let's talk about your other underdog pick then.
I have problems, man. I can't pick anybody. I also went for a little oddball. It's another game that's still going on. It's ENCE versus the Mongols. And listen, the argument for ENCE is that, I don't know, Glaive right now seems to just be fragging hard, which is cool. I think this ENCE core, coming out from 9 and being able to sort of harness a little bit more Polish power. They got Cuban with them. I do think this team has legs. I think they've got the important pieces out of that 9 roster. And if Glaive is fragging, I feel like that's a very big way to sort of bolster performance. Because typically that's where we're like, oh, in-game leaders, they'll shy away, whatever. And then for the Mongols, I'd just be excited to see an Asian team do well. And so I would happily pick them anyway. That and Senzu is literally having the tournament of his life. He's never really been a player that, for the Mongols, at least in the games and the officials that they play, he's never really been like a crazy standout player. But this man is ripping heads. I say, man, this kid is ripping heads.
Boy.
And also when he's had those chances, he'll grab an AWP and he'll fuck you with that too.
A little too much. I think
probably a little too much.
There's been too many situations I've watched him with the second AWP being like, I feel like you're playing a spot like a rifler would. You'd be better with your rifle. You're not actually that good on AWP. Like, you have highlights, you have moments, but I think you're better with a rifle in some of these spots.
But the thing is, like, he was an AWPer before he was a rifler. So when, unlike these previous Mongolian rosters, he was hard AWPing and like mega aggressive AWPing. I'm talking like Henny level. I'm gonna run at you and quickscope everybody that or maybe even beat you on timing and just win the round sort of single-handedly that way. Like, that was my first impression of Senzu. And I saw many games like that on his previous rosters, and then he joined NKT, and I think I spoke to Nine, who was on NKT at the time, and said, "Why are you AWPing over Senzu? I thought that you were transitioning." And apparently in scrims, he just goes for too many plays, like too many wild things with the AWP, and that's why he became a rifler.
Yeah.
He played, and he. It's not like he doesn't rifle well. It's just I saw the potential of what was on the AWP. And I was like, if this guy gets enough experience and he's still playing like that, we could have, a crazy AWPing talent out of the Mongolian scene. They might have even picked him up to be, not 9-10 on the Mongols roster. But, you could have argued he could have been a main AWPer. But yeah, I mean, he's having a stellar tournament. And, I've been following the Mongols for such a long period of time now that, yeah, I'm a little biased. Whatever. I don't care. I'll take it. I do want an Asian team to do quite well at one of these international events because Asia's serious business. There's more contenders in that region for, upsets and getting deeper runs in tournaments than I think Brazilian teams have to offer currently. So,
I'm 100% on the same page. I think, especially with, like, North America has a team that's always going to be there realistically in Liquid, I think, for the coming year. Complexity are going to probably go back to oscillating in and out of relevance. But beyond that, I actually don't think there's any other team in NA I'd pick over like the top 4 Chinese/Mongolian teams. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather see those teams play. So it's a shame they're always fighting over such a tiny amount of slots. Because if I had it my way, I think like an event like IEM Chengdu, I'd want half the teams to be like Lin Vision, even Rare Atom playing, the Mongols, these kinds of rosters that have been really entertaining to watch. If you ever watch Asian Counter-Strike, their matchups are always brutal classics. So I think it's a shame that we don't get to see more of them. So it'd be nice to see them beat ENCE here, but man, ENCE, they look galvanized. They look like ready to brawl. And Glaive bringing back his old fragging form from when Astralis was the best team in the world. Like, he used to be famously, for an IGL of such a good team, weirdly good with a rifle. Like, it was so odd.
That man was a smoke spam abuser, though. Back when you couldn't sort of pierce the smoke.
Yeah, back when those smokes had some technical glitches, also, famously. But he was, he was a better rifler than many would ever give him credit for, or would expect from him as an IGL. But that's shining through here, and I think a lot of people underestimated this move, because I called it, I was like, this is genius. You've taken a roster that gets you straight to the RMR. You've also picked up a roster that's played together. Sure, they've not played with this IGL, but there's so much understanding, so much chemistry already established that you don't have as much of a build-up that most teams will have to go through, going from nothing to actually having a team. So I thought it was a genius move. I hope it works out. I mean, as an underdog pick, I think they are going to struggle to go deep in this event. But finishing third isn't too crazy. It's a little crazy, but not too crazy. I think they've got a little bit of an outside shot. Not a particularly strong one, but a little one.
Yeah, I'm playing a massive game of chance. Listen, like, this is a qualifying spot for whatever of the 4 teams that we discussed. I let them decide.
Yeah, can't make the decisions yourself. Let's touch on, there's 2 more series to be played today. We've talked about who's playing in them. They will make it through to the groups, at least 2 of these 4 teams, between Big, Apex, Rebels and MAT. That's Apex and Rebels, separate teams, for those of you familiar with the Academy system. Do you think any single one of those guys, because I know neither one has picked us, do you think any of them has a chance to make it out in third place of a group?
I don't know, there's been a lot of fight to Big recently.
Yeah, I picked them last event as an underdog, and they came damn close.
Yeah. There has been a lot of fight to Big, and I think it's, a lot of that, I think when we talked about Big last podcast, we were discussing about how Prosus has looked better, but he's actually he's putting up some really, really important rounds for Big, and I think without that, there is less of a fight. I think the worry for me with Big is that I don't think I've ever seen them so tilted. I don't know what it was, but when we were watching the Blast Spring groups, it just felt like they were fucking furious all the time. Yeah. And maybe that's just Tabson being more animated, but it did seem like there was something internally going on that made them that extra bit frustrated. I'm sure their practices all look good, and and then they get in game and things start breaking down. But that happens with every team, because you're playing against other top level teams. Not everything is going to go to plan.
Yeah.
It's so strange for me to see them look so frustrated, and it's not just Tabson. It's God B at the back. It looks like he's going to have a breakdown sometimes watching these rounds. And these are the 2 veterans of what was a very old version of Big. It's so strange for them, for me to watch them be the ones that look like they've lost it. So that's I think a major concern for me.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so legitimate reasons not to pick them. I do think their level of play is going to be still fairly high. Should they get past Apex and make this group, they'll still be able to, I think, give some teams a bit of a scare, on especially their map picks, but no, there's no reason to really be picking them here. There's not enough confidence in their roster to really pick them over teams like ENCE, Cloud9, who, by the way, have just beaten Virtus.pro convincingly on third map. So that is going to be your pick locked in.
Yeah, big up the boom.
Woo! So we got the picks locked in. Yeah, hopefully this week goes a little better for me and a little worse for you, the viewer, who nailed it last week.
Almost certainly for me. Listen, I'm fine to have a hard stance on the teams that I've picked, but I will be easily persuaded otherwise. Yeah,
that's fair enough.
If they lose, they lose. It's what it is.
But yeah, let us know in the comments why our picks are terrible. Make sure to vote in the polls and let me know who you think is actually going to make it out. There's not going to be as many options, obviously, for you lot. I'm going to simplify it, as always. But yeah, hopefully this is a good event. I'm really hoping that, Spirit make it deep, because I'm so invested in that team's story.
I still can't believe, first off, we we do this after the play-ins, so you know Donk is there. If we had done this podcast prior to the play-ins, would you have? I mean, we probably still would have picked them. Yeah, we probably still would have picked them. But at the same time, how dare you? How dare I'm actually furious. How did I have Spirit with Hallie and Baz, and you get Spirit with Donk and Magix?
Well,
you can't make this up. You can't. It would have been so free.
Yeah, 9 a.m. on the 30th. I'm like, oh crap, yeah, Katowice is happening. At that point, we already knew Donk's playing. Yeah. So yeah, big up Donk, big up Spirit. Loving the merch. Let's see them win some stuff. But all right, thanks everyone for watching. If you made it this far, you're my hero. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.